Hello everybody, this is Andrei. Welcome to the Marketing Innovation Podcast Show. Today with us we have a very special guest. His name is Mitch Duckler. He is the founder of the marketing consulting and branding agency FullSurge in Chicago, Illinois. Hi Mitch, how's everything going?
I am well, thank you, Andrei. How are you?
Very good. It's a big pleasure to have you on our podcast show, and I'm really excited to talk about a lot of interesting things. So guys, what we want to discuss today and what I think is going to be a premiere here on the podcast, so this is very exciting, is branding, brand strategy, and how you as business owners or marketing people activating in different sized businesses can use branding and branding tactics to increase your companies. But I'll let Mitch take over from here and present a bit what he's doing, how he started his agency, as well as his corporate experience in branding. Mitch, would you like to quickly present yourself and tell us more about what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I have about 25 plus years in the field of brand and marketing strategy, and it's fairly equally split between what I would call client side, or in other words, a corporate side, as well as consulting. So I began my career on the client side in brand management, working for a couple of global companies, specifically Unilever in the personal care space, and then Coca-Cola in the carbonated soft drink business. And there I worked in a variety of roles, brand and product management, as well as consumer insights and customer marketing. And after about 10 years was looking for a change and made a switch into consulting, but consulting very much oriented towards those same topic areas of brand and marketing strategy. So what I've done for about the past 10, 12 years has been working with clients to help them grow their brands and leverage their brands as very strong strategic business assets.
Amazing, very interesting. So tell us a bit more about the clients that you have working with from the agency side. Like ever since you started in the past 12 years, obviously it's been a shift in the market as well when we were thinking about how consumers communicate with the brands. I'm sure, and also this is going to be one of our discussions a bit later. But what did you feel has changed in the way that consumers interacted with brands, and how companies had to adapt to this change?
Well, I think the biggest change, and actually a big impetus behind the book that I'm about to come out with, is that the power or the level of influence between consumers and manufacturers, I think, has shifted in recent years. And a lot of it has been driven by technology and communication information, and particularly the internet. So in the early days of brand management, for example, manufacturers or brand marketers really had all of the control in the equation, right? There was a very simple, straightforward distribution network and 3 broadcast television stations, at least in the United States. And, there was no cable, there was no satellite, there was no information superhighway or internet. And really what that allowed is for manufacturers or brand managers to kind of control the dialogue much more so than they are today. Today, conversely, with the emergence of the internet and content marketing and social media and everything that goes along with it, consumers have wrestled away a lot of that power, and it really has challenged marketers to be much more influencers as opposed to dictators in a command and control sense, if you will.
Yep. Okay. So going back to, with the access to a lot of information and the power being on the consumer side now to find out more about the brands, and for the brands to basically try to compete in this environment that is much more open than it used to be. What would you say are some meaningful ways that brands can differentiate themselves in front of their markets, and what they can do in order to take advantage of the opportunities that come together with this competition, but also with the internet?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that I would say. First is brand marketers need to think about differentiation in a much more expansive way than they have in the past. So traditionally, conventional wisdom would say that your positioning or your point of difference should be in the form of a customer benefit, right? That's traditional marketing 101. It goes back to the days of Reese and Trout, positioning the battle for your mind, right? And it's all about you develop a brand positioning and a promise that has to be a customer benefit. But to be honest, a lot of categories, the customer benefit, the benefit that the customers are seeking rather, is universal. Right, so that's the antithesis of differentiation. So you have brands within a category that are all chasing a common benefit. But if you think about different ways to establish differentiation, for example, you can think about how, right? Not just if the end benefit is the what, the process or the means is the how. And that can be another way to think about differentiation. So you deliver a benefit, but the way you deliver it, the unique way you deliver it, can be your point of difference.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Right. So that's one example. Another way to do it is your why. So there's been a lot in the press lately about purpose branding. You probably heard about it, and I'm sure your listeners are familiar with. Right. Yep. Goes back to Simon Sinek's famous TED Talk. Start with the why.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
the 3 circles.
Exactly. And Patagonia is a great example of a why brand. Right. They are all about sustainability and improving the environment. And so it's not a customer benefit. It's not a what. It's really about a purpose or a why. And that's really their point of difference. And a third, I would say, is the who. Right. There's a lot of brands that are really defined first and foremost by their customer target, right? Lifestyle brands, for example. Mountain Dew is a great example of that, the soft drink beverage Mountain Dew, right? Which is all about extreme sports and video game lovers, people that really kind of get off on establishing on highs, right? And it just, very strong physical and emotional excitement. So they have built a brand entirely around a target audience of extreme sports enthusiasts, for example. So those are all different ways to think about differentiation. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing I would say. Then the second is, how do you take that point of difference, that brand positioning, and manifest it in every aspect of the brand experience, the way you grow the brand and extend it into different categories and so forth, using that unique point of difference mm-hmm. as inspiration for those different elements of activation. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's see, because ultimately we'd like to be able to offer, you guys that are listening to us as well, some sort of applicable advice that you can implement in your own businesses. So, Mitch, let's say for somebody that has a rather small to medium business, maybe they are just starting out, or maybe they have a couple of years down the line. Now, obviously, you have been through this journey quite a while ago. So, guys, Mitch is also an entrepreneur. He's been running his own agency for 12 years now. He's working with a lot of enterprise clients, Fortune 500 companies. So he has a lot of experience in the branding, corporate branding type of space. So, Mitch, what would you say for a company that is, a couple of years old? Some things that they should definitely be looking at doing in their messaging and in their branding in order to establish their place in the market?
Well, I would say two things. One is, when you think about how you want to be positioned, think about it from two different angles. One is what I would say inside out. So what are your business objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? And what sort of unique competencies do you have, right? So what makes you different? Yep. What makes you better? What makes you special? That's kind of the inside out, right? But then you marry that with what I would call the outside in, or the customer perspective. So what sort of things are your customers or your potential market looking for from the type of products or services that you offer? And it's really, when you look at it from both of those angles, right? What is it that the customer is seeking? What sort of unmet needs are there that you can fulfill? And then what are the competencies, those unique strengths or competitive advantage that you bring to the market that you can offer? And it's really in that intersection of the two that you kind of have that magical sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and also you briefly mentioned about the augmented product benefits, and that brands should not focus only about, a feature or a need that, like a specific need that they fulfill, but also about the augmented product benefits and the experience of the customer with that product. So tell us more about that, or tell us about some examples you have encountered in your recent years of a brand or a couple of brands that have done this very well, and the insight that maybe our listeners could take home and implement in their business as well, or think about.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of examples that I reference in the book, for example, in terms of customer experience. And first of all, what I would say is instead of thinking about customer experience, think about brand experience. And I think that's something that I find that companies make a mistake. They think about what they call, and I've heard this very often throughout my years in brand management, the ideal customer experience, as if there is only one, right? And what marketers often tend to do, or brand managers tend to do, is they go out and they research what is that experience.
Sorry for interrupting, but this is just a question that popped up in my head, and maybe it can help us develop even more on the subject. Would you think that the brands think about ideal customer brand experience because they have an ideal customer persona? So would you say that this is the cause why they try to match the experience to this ideal customer persona, or would you say they're not linked?
Well, they tend to think about, they do research, and in fact, absent of the brand. So for example, if they are looking for, if it's a hotel brand, right, they might ask about what are you looking for from a hotel stay, right, in terms of what's the check-in experience, what should that be like, what should the common space area look like and feel like and offer, what about room service, how about amenities like a workout facility, or how should that be? And they do that without necessarily a brand lens. And one example that I mentioned in the book is, and it's actually a client of mine, Hyatt Hotels. They have a select service brand called Hyatt Place. So as the name would imply, select service means it's not full service, right? It's limited service. And when they went about defining their brand experience, they applied that lens, right? They didn't try to strive for an ideal or optimal experience, because they arguably would have over-delivered, right? And actually delivered an experience that is not consistent with the premise of that brand.
Gotcha. Okay. Super good insight. So taking this into, the modern age when most communication is being done digitally, and most of the interaction between brands is also being done digitally, unless they are business to consumer brands like beverages or food, and then the communication eventually translates in the direct purchase of that product and consuming it and so on. What would you say that, given let's say one of our listeners now, they have a product or a product-based business and they sell that product, and they know exactly how their brand ideally should look like. What would you say is, or are, good ways of using this brand positioning as a guidepost for digital activation and for transposing that whole brand online?
That's a great question. And the answer is it's fairly similar to experience in general, and that is start with the brand and think about when you activate your brand in the digital realm. It's no different than if you activate it in the analog space, right? Whenever you do anything from a marketing perspective, whether it's advertising or promotion, any type of communication or effort, right? You start with your brand positioning and you reflect that in every aspect of that activation element. And it should be no different from a digital perspective either. But what we have found over the years is digital tends to be very tactically oriented, right? So people think very much about transactions, about activities, whether it's posts or comments or shares, and they tend to think about it in a much more tactical versus strategic manner. And again, very often absent of the brand. There is, because of the immediate feedback of digital and the ability to drive transaction, I think there's a temptation on the part of marketers to act in a way that is very transactional as opposed to relationship, and as opposed to brand building. So what I coach clients to do in the digital space is to balance both. Yes, digital has a unique ability to drive transactions in the short term, but you need to do so in a very responsible way, in a way that also builds the long-term equity of your brand. Otherwise, that brand equity begins to erode. If you are doing things that sacrifice the long-term brand building equity, right, in favor of short-term transactions, right? So you need to act in a way in the digital space that is very consistent with your brand, or like in any other type of marketing activity. Over time, you begin to erode that brand equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one issue though that we found, at least some of our clients had in acting in this sort of brand-oriented awareness type of way digitally, is that many times it's very hard to, as opposed to the tactical way, it's very hard to assess the results in terms of brand awareness or these very soft metrics to linked to the brand. Whereas if you want to track, let's say, transactions or engagement or these sort of things, then these are very easily traceable, and because they are very easily traceable, they are much easier to maybe pitch to senior leadership when they have to make decisions in terms of budgeting or effectiveness of marketing activities and so on and so forth. So, for the people that have this issue of tracking the softer metrics of branding and of brand growth, what would be some of the advice that you'd give them, or some of the insights that you have found are useful in order to justify investing in this area more?
Yeah, another great question. It is very difficult to measure the softer, if you will, the softer, more intangible aspects of brand building, right? And especially in digital. And you're absolutely right. Because digital is so uniquely qualified to give you metrics and feedback that are more transactional in nature, I think that's what marketers tend to defer to. And there really are no easy answers to how you can actually track brand metrics in the digital realm. I think there are some strides being made in the market research arena that will make that different in the future. But at a minimum, I think just doing some basic brand tracking in terms of what are the key attributes of your brand positioning, right? That you need to follow and that you need to win on versus your competitors if you're going to establish that positioning. Make sure you're tracking those, and then correlating with your digital activity, and as you begin to activate or continue to activate in the digital realm, are you messaging around the key points and reinforcing the key aspects of your brand positioning? And are those being reflected in your metrics, right? Are you beginning to see a positive uptick in some of those attributes that you're trying to establish as your brands?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I think one of the other things that maybe you guys listening can use in trying to track or to justify this investment into growing the actual brand would be to judge the results of these activities in comparison to more tactical activities that you might be doing, or more transactional campaigns that you are running. So I think that, Mitch, this is also something that you have just touched on when you said to try to strike a balance between the two, right? So judging in parallel and trying to link some of the activities to some of the results from the more tactical campaigns, right?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I remember reading a quote, and I don't recall who it was from, but they said, when you think about those two, even if you can strike a 70-30 balance, right, kind of a theoretical balance, but 70% transaction and 30% longer term brand building, even that is a pretty good mix, right? That and a good allocation of your investment dollar. Yes, we realize that we live in a very pragmatic business environment, right? And it's all about bottom line and dollars and cents, and you want a very positive ROI on any investment you make, right? And digital activation is no exception. But even if you can think about 30%, 30 cents on every dollar, if you will, going toward something that's reinforcing your brand equity and building a relationship with your customers as opposed to just driving a short-term transaction, will serve you well in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that much of the value that this brings also can be seen in the rise of influencer marketing and how people tend to build relationships or to bring to life relationships with brands and other people follow based on, influencers. Now, again, this is we have to use our judgment when we make a statement in terms of that. But generally speaking, paid influencer partnership, let's say, with a brand should be, the influencer and the brand should share the same values, etc., etc., and then the community should judge the brand in the filter of the influencer's values, and considering these should match with the influencers. But I think that again here, this personal relationship of the brand with the customers is very important in generating that transaction in the end.
Yeah, and Andrei, I would add to that. If you think about it, digital provides a very unique opportunity to do that, to establish more of a relationship than traditional than traditional marketing. For example, advertising tends to be very one way. Television advertising is unidirectional, right? You film a 30-second commercial and you put it out there, and the viewer or the consumer consumes it, right? They see it. Digital, provides the opportunity to be much more personal, much more customized in your message, and much more interactive in nature. So it inherently provides an opportunity for more interaction and more relationship building than traditional media.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then again, maybe an extension of this discussion that I know we were briefly talking about as well before the episode, but many times, and I guess that the bigger the brands, the more this becomes valid, and maybe even more in the hospitality business or businesses to do with services as well as the actual product. How would you say a brand can reflect a differentiated brand positioning through the entire customer experience? So that would be from maybe the digital first touch point to maybe making a booking or the first point of contact with that brand more physically, and then post-purchase as well, interactions with the staff employed by that brand, etc., etc. What are some insights that you have discovered?
Yeah, so when we work with clients on brand experience, what we typically do, we start with what you just referred to, right? As you think about the customer journey, you think about it in three phases: pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase, right? And which is, I think, what you were alluding to. And you start with just identifying, cataloging all of the different touch points that make up the entire experience, across those three dimensions, pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase. And then think about each of those touch points in terms of three different metrics. One is, how important is that particular touch point to the overall experience? Because not all touch points are created equal, rather, right? Some are a little bit more important than others. So how important is that particular touch point to the overall experience? The second thing is, what is the gap between where you are today in delivering your promise on that touch point and what the aspiration should be for that touch point? So in other words, your brand promise, inherently sets a certain expectation for what that touch point should deliver. What is the gap, right? How big of a gap is there between where you are today and where you want to be, right? And then third, how difficult or challenging or time consuming would it be to close that gap? And when you think about those three things, how important is it, how big of a gap, and how challenging would it be to close that gap, you can start to prioritize where in the customer experience you want to focus and where you want to focus your attention and your dollars on making improvements.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Super cool. Because we know that many of you guys are entrepreneurs or working in small to medium-sized businesses. Mitch is also one of us in terms of entrepreneur. He has started his company. He's been through the journey. He's worked in businesses before that, so he has the experience of both worlds. Now, Mitch, what was your experience of becoming an entrepreneur? Like, what made you want to step up and open your own business? What was the inspiration behind it? What were some challenges that you had to face when you opened it?
Yeah, great questions. And I think you bring up a good point. I've really had the privilege, I guess, or the honor of being able to work on both sides of the fence. So most of my clients, as I pointed out earlier, are Fortune 500, publicly traded companies, some of the biggest companies in the world, like an ExxonMobil, which I believe is still the largest company in the world. Right? But yet the companies that I've worked with and for tend to be very small. And entrepreneurial. Even before I founded my own firm, I was in a consulting firm of several hundred people, which isn't necessarily an entrepreneurial company, but certainly on a far smaller scale than a lot of my clients. So I've had the opportunity to kind of look at business through both lenses. And my clients, which tend to be very, very large, and then the firms I've worked for and my own firm as well, smaller. And one of the things that I do like about the entrepreneurial path is just the ability to cut through a lot of the bureaucracy that tends to exist in larger companies. I find very often I can almost get frustrated. I feel the frustration of some of my large corporate clients and their inability to move in an agile manner. And to respond quickly to changing market conditions. And I think one of the advantages of being an entrepreneur, I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to, is just the ability to make changes on the fly, right? You're not, you're not changing, you can change direction so much more quickly and nimbly than you can in a larger company. And that's something that I really do appreciate about being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So in terms of your company, how big are you guys at the moment, and what are your plans for growth?
So we have roughly a dozen consultants, and our model is, and our point of difference, if you will, is we are all senior level consultants, right? So a lot of consulting firms, including ones that I used to work for, had kind of the pyramid model, right? Of partners, and then the partner and senior partners that do a lot of the selling and the business development. They pitch a project, they win a project, and then the clients never see them again. Right? They turn their junior level team with MBAs that are maybe just a few years out of business school, and those are the only people you ever see. Our model is very different, right? So everybody is pretty much like me. All of my colleagues are 25 to 30 plus year veterans. We have no junior level people. The people who sell you the project work are the ones that do it. So that's really our point of difference, and I think a lot of clients really come to appreciate that we're not going to walk away after we sell the project. We're going to be there, and we're going to actually be the ones doing the work, and that's a model that's worked fairly well for us. In terms of growth, I think it does limit our growth, right? I think we'd only grow so large when we have a model and a mindset like that. But we still, our goal is really just to do first class work for top notch clients and grow, but not necessarily try to become a 500 or 1,000 consultant firm. Or we're not looking to become the next McKinsey, if you will. I think our growth goals are a little bit more modest.
Yeah, no, but I guess that together with this sort of small, like a bit smaller team, and also with the degree of proficiency around your company, I think there's that personal satisfaction of being sure that everybody on your team works closely together, and then also that you can almost always guarantee the same quality of work for any of your new clients,
Absolutely.
No matter the size of them.
Great point. Yes, exactly. That we're very, very focused on client satisfaction and quality control. We don't take on projects that we have any doubt that we can exceed expectations in terms of quality of our output.
Mm-hmm. That's super cool. Yeah, this is something that we strive towards as well with our digital agency. So again, we try as much as possible to get in our team people that are, so for example, I'm also a director like you are, managing partner. So always involved with closing the deals and doing the negotiations and the contracts. But what we try to do is not run away after like the new client is on board, but also support them with the implementation of a campaign, so all the way to the end, being there for the meetings, showing up for whether there are urgencies or new campaigns that have to be delivered and so on. And this is our aspiration as well, like 10 years from now, to be that sort of company that we don't want to go to 1,000 people either, but we want to have a team that we are sure, when any of them are coming on the table and are responsible of a project, for us to be able to guarantee the top-notch quality for any client.
Exactly. And what I would also say, just being very balanced in my feedback, and I'm sure you've realized it too, and probably a lot of your listeners, is there's drawbacks, right, to that size too. So one of the things I miss about working for larger companies, right, and like I said, I've worked with the Unilevers and the Coca-Colas, is you don't have the resources at your disposal that you do with a larger company. And you do have to be a lot more resourceful. I find myself doing things at times that I don't really want to do, that I feel are a little bit more menial or administrative in nature, because I don't have those resources. But yet that's really kind of the downside, I guess, of being an entrepreneur, right? You probably have to wear a lot more hats. You have to do things that maybe you would have other departments or other functions in a larger company do, but you take the good with the bad, right?
Yeah, and also, like, that's what makes life more fun, because you never know what the
it does. It does. It's a great point.
Super cool. Okay, so going back to the branding discussion, I think this was an amazing topic. I'm so happy that we did it. It was a premiere on our podcast, focusing on this subject. So I'm very glad and very thankful for you being on our episode. Do you feel there will be any other topics or extensions to the topics that we could detail a bit more on?
No, I think, again, and I'm thinking back to also the various chapters of the book, which really talk about all of the different ways to think about taking a brand, a very strong brand positioning, and manifesting it throughout the entire business. One of the things we talk a lot about in the book is brand extendibility. And I do think that, so once you have a brand, how do you grow it? How do you take advantage of all of the equity that you built in that brand and monetize it in different ways, right? And through new product introductions and new service introductions and so forth. And one of the things I talk about in the book is encouraging marketers to think about their brands much more holistically, right? So typically when brand managers think about, how do I grow a brand, they think about it in very functional and what I would say tangible terms, right? So we are a let's say a cookie or a cracker brand. Therefore, the only types of products we can come out with are other cookies and crackers, right? It's inherently limiting. But when you think about a brand on those more intangible aspects that we talked about earlier, the persona, the attitude, the emotional benefits that they represent, I think that gives you a lot of permission to grow in a much more transformational manner, right?
Great point.
And I think brand managers very often play it a little too safe, right? They, for good reason and good intention, they have guardrails, right? Their brand positioning serves as guardrails, which is a good thing. But if it's taken too far, I think it limits your growth, and it comes out, you end up with having very uninspiring ho-hum line extensions, right? Because you aren't thinking about your brand as holistically as you can be. And your brand, I always tell clients, your brand positioning shouldn't only be a guardrail, right? For extension, it should also be inspiration for how you can extend your brand to be relevant in multiple different categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an amazing point. And actually, thinking about branding back to, the origins, this is so true, because, ultimately the success of the company is how easily can they adapt if the market situation changes, or how easily can they come with a new product to fulfill a demand, or to pivot if that specific niche that they are into doesn't work anymore. And when they're gonna do that, it's very important for the brand to be still there, so the customers still identify with that and are able to transition to the new product if it's something that still appeals to the same, like customer group.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think it's a good point. It's not only a way to identify new opportunities for growth, but it's also, to your point, a hedge, right? And if there are certain limitations or a downturn in certain product categories, and your brand is diversified and can pursue other markets or other business opportunities, it's all the better.
Mm-hmm. Super. Great point. Awesome. Mitch, thanks so much for today. It was really a big pleasure to have you here and really insightful talk. Guys listening, I hope that you also have found, some great and valuable insight here, and you are going to go there and you are going to apply it to your business. If you have any further questions or anything, let us know. We're going to put in the podcast description links to Mitch's book, Mitch's business, and also where you can find him. You can connect on LinkedIn as well. If you have a bigger business, or you feel that Mitch's services you could work with Mitch in helping you grow your brand, then be sure to get in touch. I'm sure that Mitch will be happy to discuss more with you and help you get to the desired brand that you'd like to be. Until then, Mitch, a great pleasure. Thanks a lot again.
Thank you, Andrei. It was wonderful meeting you, and I appreciate the time and hope that your listeners found this informative, and please do feel free to reach out to me with any questions, or if there's any way I can be of service to you guys.
Thanks a lot. And until next time, have an amazing day. Speak soon.
Bye.